I'm Kiyan.
And this is Triple Play, that podcast where we think fourth dimensionally in Back to the Future.
Written by Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale.
Was directed by Robert Zemeckis and then produced by Bob Gale and Neil Canton.
And released in 1985, 1989, and 1990.
Yep, so this is Triple Play.
Yes, that podcast we have been hinting at in Trust Your Doctor for over a year and is now finally being recorded.
And released, if you're listening to this, I guess.
Hopefully it's going to be released. Right, we recorded an episode 0 prior to this, which explains what this is, but, you know, this is episode 1, so I feel like we might as well just sort of summarize what we said in that episode here a little bit. We shouldn't take too long.
Yeah.
But basically what we do is we watch trilogies, talk about them, and talk about how they work as a trilogy, talk about our experiences watching them, and sort of behind-the-scenes stuff. And we're going to aim to focus less on storyline than in Trust Your Doctor, just because, you know, everyone and their grandmas watched Back to the Future, and so we feel we don't really need to explain the storyline of this and, like, most of the movies we're planning on watching. So we hope to focus more on behind-the-scenes stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, until we do the, like, obscure trilogies that no one's heard of, like Cinderella.
1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
God. Right, but that's what we're aiming for. It's not... no promises, no promises.
Yeah, this show could be completely different than what we're selling it to you as, which it shouldn't be. I don't think we're that bad at doing this, but I don't know, maybe we are. That's for you to decide. Right, so we watched Back to the Future in one sitting, and it was a thing. Not much more to say about that. This is our second time actually doing the Back to the Future marathon.
Right, we might as well just make it a point now and start most episodes with this. Actually, all episodes with this, to just say how many times we've watched the movie, you know, when we watched the movie and stuff like that. Yeah. I guess. So we probably shouldn't reveal that we're figuring this out as we go along. But anyway, I've seen Back to the Future 1, I think 4 or 5 times, and then 2 and 3, including the marathon we just did for this episode, twice each. So a total of 5. Is that 9?
9 movie run times?
Yes, that.
Yeah, that's about the same as me, I think. Yeah, actually, I think I'm pretty much exactly the same.
Right, and we actually watched all 3 Back to the Future films in a row years ago. I think, you know, just for fun, and so we did it again here.
Except this time we watched the bloopers and the outtakes and the deleted scenes, which were interesting to say the least, and we can see why they were deleted.
So I think we want to just jump right into sort of how these films were conceived. Unlike Trust Your Doctor, we're not going to go linearly through the story.
Well, not too linearly.
Not too linearly, hopefully. And we're not going to explain as much in detail. But the behind-the-scenes story for Back to the Future is quite interesting. So, yeah. Hopefully, I was entertained looking all this up, and originally not conceived as strictly a time travel movie.
Yeah,
it was Bob Gale, coming right off the heels of I think it was Used Cars. He and Zemeckis did that together, I believe. I've never seen that.
Something like that.
And, you know, Bob Gale went to his parents' house to visit, and he was taking a look through his dad's old high school yearbook, and he saw that his dad was a student class president or something like that.
Yeah.
And he said to himself, hey, I hated student government as a kid. I wonder if I would have been friends with my dad if we were in high school together. And that's where this concept came from. A kid visiting his parents a past version of his parents in high school, and obviously that lends itself to time travel. So that's where that came from.
Yeah, and then the whole time travel element went through multiple revisions before they finally ended up at a DeLorean. I think the very first draft had it as kind of just a chamber that had to be powered up.
Yeah, it was just a room that Marty would walk into, and then I think they revised that and went for a refrigerator
that they would nuke to power it, which was nixed because they didn't really want kids climbing into refrigerators, because that's kind of a bad idea. But that idea would make a reappearance in Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. So
the nuking thing, too. It was on the nuclear test ground in that film, and that film got a lot of flack for that scene. So who knows what would have happened if they had done that in the original Back to the Future.
Well, we wouldn't have gotten the sequels, that's for sure. The film probably would have tanked.
I don't think we can jump to that conclusion, but the film does have the very humorous writing style. It's not dark, and it's not intended to be dark at all. I mean, it might get a little serious at times, but it's mainly just supposed to be this fun movie. So, which is why Spielberg liked it so much. He took a look at the script and he thought the characters really advanced the plot rather than the characters being written for the plot. That's always a good thing. And watching these films again, you can see that Marty and Doc are such an interesting duo. And Marty is just, I think Michael J. Fox, who plays Marty, obviously, if you didn't know that, it's like his most famous role. I think he made this one comment like, yeah, Marty is exactly who I was in high school. All he does is play guitar and skateboard and pick up girls and stuff like that. So I think that's why he was perfect for the role, which we'll get into later, because Zemeckis and Gale also thought he was perfect for the role.
Right, and this is just an aside, but if you're really curious and want to read the refrigerator script, you can actually find it online. And I know this because I was looking for the Back to the Future script not recently, like a year ago, and I accidentally stumbled upon the refrigerator version of the script, and I was like, this is not the film, what? It's very weird, and bears few similarities. Well, not like a lot of differences, but the similarities are hidden underneath the whole nuking the fridge thing.
Yeah, I think I read that Zemeckis and Gale sort of got very wrapped up in the time machine aspect of the movie, and when you go back and look at this, obviously it's Back to the Future, it's like the time travel movie, but when you go back and look at maybe just the first movie alone, it's not the time travel isn't. It's part of it, but it's not strictly a time travel movie. It's not Marty traveling through time, going to like prehistoric times, or well, they go to the Wild West eventually, but
and that's prehistoric.
No, I mean they don't go to like they don't. It's not a time travel movie in the sense that he's going to all these fantastic places. It's very much still set in Hill Valley, and that's another thing that in the original script they need to go power this chamber or nuke it or whatever. So they go to this nuclear testing site, obviously, and that's outside of Hill Valley. So the final script ended up being contained in just this one city, which adds a sense of coherence to the film that the second one lacked. But I think we'll get there when we get there. Also, another major difference I read in the original script is I think Marty was a lot. You might have noticed this when you read when you read the original way back, but Marty I think was a lot more brooding and suicidal.
He was the stereotypical angsty teenager.
So that's obviously revised in the final product,
which is it makes the film a lot better. It would be really weird to watch an angsty Marty with Doc Brown,
with the eccentric Doc, and just all these other funny things going on. I think the original script was finished in 80 or 80. Well, no, 81, I believe it was. but the movie obviously didn't come out until July 3rd, 1985.
Right, and that's partially because no studio really wanted to take the script because it was not really...
Well,
kind of wasn't risque enough, supposedly.
Yeah. Apparently wasn't edgy enough for a lot of studios. So Zemeckis and Gale actually took it to Disney, and they said, no, this is too much. We can't have a kid's mom falling in love and trying to kiss her, and succeeding at kissing.
I guess it was too risque for Disney, but not risque enough for everyone else.
Yeah. They were sort of at this middle ground, I suppose.
Luckily...
But Spielberg loved it.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think this was Zemeckis more than Gale, who didn't want to jump on board with Spielberg because they already had twice in the past gotten on board with Spielberg as their producer. Mm-hmm. And I think Zemeckis made the comment that he didn't want to be known as part of the team that could only get their movie produced because they're friends with Spielberg.
Right.
So he wanted to, I guess, carve his own name for himself. So he went on to direct in between, I guess, the original script for Back to the Future being finished and 1985, which is when the movie came out. Zemeckis directed, I don't know if he wrote it, but Romancing the Stone, which was a big success. Right. So after that, he felt confident enough to do another movie with Spielberg. And then, so I guess he sort of wanted to prove to himself, really. I don't think maybe people in Hollywood would have given him flack, but not the basic consumer wouldn't have minded anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, Spielberg's name isn't even that prevalent in the movie. It shows up once at the beginning. It was like Steven Spielberg presents. That's
a big name, though. I mean, just the fact, even though he's executive producer on this, and I'm not too well versed in the movie industry. You know, if you're looking for a super critical and actual review for this, you're in the wrong place. But I don't exactly. I would say, I guess based on what I know about the video game industry, it's completely different. The executive producer is less prominent than the producer in terms of what actually goes into the making and marketing of the movie.
Yeah, I mean...
but Spielberg is such a big name that no matter how he's involved in the movie, sticking his name at the beginning is just... If he's involved in the movie in any way, you want his name on the opening credits, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, he's... coming off of like E.T. at this time, and Star Wars would have come out by then, and Indiana Jones. So he's got a lot of success under his belt at this point. But I mean, his name isn't like the only name on the poster. Like even on the poster, it says Steven Spielberg presents Back to the Future, Robert Zemeckis films.
Yeah, so, Zemeckis is already known at this point too.
And Bob Gale is just some random guy.
I think he was Zemeckis' partner, I believe, for a lot of his films.
For a while. Yeah.
Obviously not even nowadays not as prominent in a name as Zemeckis. Like when you think Back to the Future, you think Zemeckis, and then
yeah. Well, I think most people think Zemeckis and Gale, but I think if you were to drop Bob Gale or Robert Zemeckis as a name, more people would recognize Zemeckis than Gale. Yeah. Mainly because Zemeckis is still making films.
Yeah, I mean, he did Forrest Gump. Well, that's not recent, but he did Forrest Gump. That's like one of the most acclaimed movies of all time, I think.
Yeah, and one of his recent films is a film called Flight, which came out like 2 years ago already, and he's still working on one that's supposed to come out this year, 2015, or next year, 2016. So he's still in the industry.
Yeah, he did the 2007 Beowulf. I didn't know that.
Yeah. With Alan Silvestri, unsurprisingly.
Right, well, Alan Silvestri was the composer for this, and I didn't know this, but apparently he has worked on almost all of Zemeckis' films.
They've done 15 films together at this point. It's kind of like the when you hear John Williams, you immediately think Spielberg. No, because John Williams and Spielberg do a lot of films together.
Yeah, and I don't know, the music was lightheartedly fitting for this. I mean, this is the final product is such a lighthearted film when it comes down to it, and it's just it takes itself. It's like a lot of 80s films where it takes itself seriously enough, but you know it's just so wacky and weird that like it's just fun. It's not super tongue in cheek like a lot of today's movies, like Hot Tub Time Machine and stuff like The Hangover, where it's just so over the top and tongue in cheek. But this is actually, it tells an interesting story, but it's just so wacky.
Yeah, and I think the score is pretty fitting for the movie. Apparently, Alan Silvestri did Romancing the Stone too, and Zemeckis was displeased with the score for that film and kind of came to Silvestri and said, I want you to make like a super bombastic, over-the-top score for this film because I want the film to feel like it's super high budget and super huge when it's not really. The first film wasn't really produced on that high of a budget, only $19 million, which in today's standards isn't huge, but it's also not small. I mean, by today's standards, it's tiny.
Yeah, it made like 20 times that in the box office. So, but, well, the production also wasn't only hindered due to budget, it was hindered a lot due to time. And time
ironically enough.
Yeah, I mean, time constraints in this were apparently just terrible. I think
part of that may come down to Michael J. Fox.
Yeah.
Sorry for interrupting.
No. I was actually just about to say that. Zemeckis and Gale originally wanted Michael J. Fox to play Marty, and if you've watched Back to the Future, you know that happened. So so you'd say, okay, so he plays Marty, but well, they couldn't get him at first because he was doing Family Ties, which is a sitcom. Mm-hmm. I've never watched it.
Never have I.
I guess it was big in the 80s, and that's a little before our time. Well, a lot before our time. I think that ran for 10 years. Family Ties,
something like that. It was pretty big at the time, which is kind of why Michael J. Fox couldn't get out of it. Film this.
Yeah, and I mean it's a sitcom, so new seasons every year, I guess. So, and that's a lot of filming. So they couldn't get Michael J. Fox, so they held auditions. There were a few other people they had in mind, and they ended up getting Eric Stoltz,
right?
Who isn't well? He was in Pulp Fiction, I guess.
Which I haven't seen.
I mean, same, but isn't as prominent a name, I suppose.
I suppose he would be, I guess, if he starred in Back to the Future.
Yeah.
He would be a bigger name. Well, that also depends on whether or not the film would have succeeded with him as Marty McFly. There's kind of a lot of what-ifs that would happen.
But they eventually they wanted Fox, but they settled for Stoltz. You know, it's the best they could do. And Universal, I think, was really pushing them for them to get this movie out by a certain date. Because a lot of people weren't sure that this would be a success.
Still.
A lot of, despite getting it greenlit and all that, I read that a lot of people at Universal felt that time travel movies just weren't enjoyable. And audiences wouldn't enjoy a movie which is... Well, let's put it this way. Sid Sheinberg, I guess the head of Universal at the time, didn't even want the word time in the title. Mm-hmm. It was he thought it just wouldn't even be successful with that. He wanted to call it Spaceman from Pluto.
Which doesn't even make sense plot-wise. Pluto doesn't even play into it.
Well, the original line, instead of my name is Darth Vader from the planet Vulcan, when Marty is trying to convince his dad to ask his mom to the dance.
He was a spaceman from Pluto.
It was originally I'm Darth Vader from the planet Pluto.
Wow. Wow, that would have been such an obscure title still, though.
It would have. I don't understand why he wanted to go with that.
Thankfully, Zemeckis and Gale kind of were like, no, we're calling it Back to the Future.
Yeah, it was actually Spielberg. And I don't know if you've heard this, but pretty much everyone except Sid Sheinberg wanted to call it Back to the Future. I said earlier that the word time is in the title. That's not true. But I don't know why I thought it, but for a second there. But anyway, so everyone wanted it to be called Back to the Future except Sheinberg. But then so Spielberg wanted to go over his head. So he wrote this note to Sheinberg saying, thanks for suggesting the title Spaceman from Pluto. We all had a good laugh over it. And he knew Sheinberg would have too much pride to admit that he actually meant it seriously. So that kind of put an end to that.
Subverting the chain of command there. But,
Scheinberg, I think, also, we're sort of derailing what we were talking about before, but Scheinberg also had a few other ideas, which ended up actually making it into the movie. He replaced Einstein. Doc Brown's dog was originally a chimpanzee.
Yeah, and Scheinberg was like, movies with chimps don't do well. We're making him a dog. I don't care what you say. So that's how he ended up with Einstein the dog. And I guess Copernicus in the second and third film.
And Doc's dog in the first. Doesn't he has a dog in
the first one? Yeah, it's Copernicus. The 1955 dog is Copernicus, and the 85 one is Einstein.
Yeah. It would have been a little weird seeing Einstein as a chimp, but hey, in another universe, we're probably like, it would have been weird seeing Einstein as a dog. I don't know. Another one.
Yeah, is that the same universe where Eric Stoltz played Marty McFly?
Sure, why not? Another one of Scheinberg's suggestions was changing Meg's name to Lorraine. Marty's mom was originally named Meg. Mm-hmm. Lorraine was the name of Scheinberg's wife, I believe. Maybe he just liked it. I don't know.
Well, I mean, he would have to some extent if he married a woman named Lorraine. But going back to the Eric Stoltz thing...
He liked it because he married a woman named Lorraine.
True. But going back to Eric Stoltz... They actually did 4 weeks...
5 weeks, I think.
4 or 5 weeks of filming with Eric Stoltz.
I don't know.
As Marty McFly and Zemeckis and Gale kind of sat down and watched the footage that they had and kind of said, this isn't really working and it's not really getting the comedic vibe that we want from the film.
Right, they liked Stoltz as an actor. They even after they let him go, they continued to commend him and say his acting was great, but it was apparently just a more dramatic performance, whereas they wanted a more comedic one. And they thought only Michael J. Fox could bring that to the table. And I think part of that is due to the fact that Fox, I think Stoltz had been in several high school comedies at this point, but Fox was a sitcom actor, and I guess he was well versed in getting across those fast laughs. Sitcoms have that such fast paced dialogues. There's only 22 minutes to get it all through. So I think they wanted something like that, the fast paced comedic dialogue with a sitcom, and you can see that in Back to the Future. It sort of has that. Yeah, and I think they thought Fox could do that. He was a sitcom actor.
So they kind of, after talking it over with some people, they were actually able to get Michael J. Fox to do the film. They had to work with the producers of Family Ties to work out a schedule for filming for Michael J. Fox, but they eventually got it together kind of in crunch time filming mode where they kind of rapid shot everything ever in the film.
Yeah, I think for Fox it was Family Ties during the day, Back to the Future at night, and almost no sleep.
Which is impressive because he doesn't look sleep deprived at all in the movie.
And makeup.
That's true. But,
and that's a lot of lines to memorize.
Yeah.
In a movie and a televised sitcom at the same time. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you really wouldn't be able to tell because Fox does a good job as Marty McFly. He does a fantastic job. I'd say it's his most famous role ever. Or it's his most well-known role.
It's his most well-known role for sure.
Yeah.
And, when people are making jokes about Michael J. Fox, they almost always revert to, the Back to the Future joke about, Doc! Kind of things like that. And then...
or his, what does he have?
He has Parkinson's.
Yeah.
But
now...
We're not going to get into that. But footage still exists of Eric Stoltz as Marty McFly. They kind of decided at that point they wouldn't ever really release all of the footage they shot. I guess both to uphold Eric Stoltz's name, but and to not drag him through the mud. This is what he did. Look how bad it is compared to the real film. But also just because why would you release it? They've released snippets here and there of a couple seconds of scenes. The scene where Marty first goes back and he sees his dad in the cafe.
Yeah, a little earlier than that, actually. It was the scene where Marty first realizes he's in 1955, and if you've seen the original Back to the Future, you know that it's Marty sort of just scampering around, and he's like, what's going on? And it's really high energy, despite the fact that Marty is sort of distressed and doesn't exactly know what's going on. It's a very high energy scene, I guess. It's like, oh my, it's this realization. But then if you go, you can find the footage with Eric Stoltz easily online. If you watch this, it's a lot more dramatic. It's him. He's not really tripping over himself because as Marty, I think Michael J. Fox has this tendency to sort of scamper around and trip over himself, and I think that's really funny. But it's Eric Stoltz sort of just gazing around at everything very dramatically, and it's a good performance. Like Zemeckis and Gale continued to assert, Stoltz wasn't a subpar actor. It was just his portrayal of Marty was different than what they were intending, and it's a lot more dramatic if you watch this footage with Eric Stoltz.
Right. So, I guess continuing with casting, Christopher Lloyd wasn't the first choice to play Doc Brown.
And I was surprised, like,
either.
What? What?
Right.
Doc Brown wasn't the first choice to play Doc Brown?
Right. The first choice was apparently someone named John Lithgow, who actually appeared in Interstellar recently. So
really, who was he? I did not know this.
One sec. We can.
We're checking this now.
Donald.
Ooh, Donald.
He was the father. He was the father of
main character's dad. Main character's
dad.
in-law.
So Murph's grandfather.
Yeah, it was main character's wife's dad, actually.
Yeah, his father-in-law. So he was the first choice to actually play Doc Brown.
Wow.
But he was unavailable, so they kind of...
So they got actual Doc Brown.
Actual Doc...
I mean, come on, Christopher Lloyd's Doc Brown. Like, I mean, he's played many other things, but he's Doc Brown. Like, come on.
And he doesn't look like he's aged at all since Back to the Future came out. He still looks exactly the same.
Well, I think he was only like 50 when Back to the Future came out. So a lot of Doc Brown's look, I think, was makeup and such.
Yeah.
Because, I think the only other thing I've watched with Christopher Lloyd in it was Cuckoo's Nest.
He's in
the Cuckoo's Nest.
He's in Star Trek
3.
5, I think. The one with the assassination plot. He's one of the Klingons who tries to assassinate someone.
He's many other things. A lot of which we're not going to get into because we don't know about it.
Right.
But yeah, the duo was finally formed. They had Christopher Lloyd and Michael J. Fox.
Right. And they had Christopher Lloyd when they had Eric Stoltz as well, but obviously then they got Michael J. Fox, and we have the famous duo that we all know and love today.
And I don't think Eric Stoltz, maybe it was just due to the footage that we saw, Eric Stoltz didn't wear the orange jacket, the iconic
the
orange life preserver, yes.
No, I think he wore like more brooding Marty McFly jacket.
Yeah, that might have been in part due to the original script. I'm not sure, but yeah, other actors included Leah Thompson as Lorraine, and Crispin Glover, I think
Crispin
it is.
Glover.
Yeah, Crispin Glover. I always forget his last name, as
George McFly.
And there was some controversy surrounding that.
Right, specifically
actually,
involving the second and third films.
Right, before we get into that, though, I think Leah Thompson, I don't know how to pronounce it, was...
Princess Leia Thompson.
No, I think she was originally cast because she'd worked opposite of Stoltz at some point.
Which is awkward because then Stoltz kind of got let go and they brought in Michael J. Fox, and I guess they just kept her on.
Right, and Crispin Glover, we can talk about the Crispin Glover controversy.
Yeah.
I should also mention...
Let's talk about Biff first.
Okay, yeah, Biff. If you've seen the movies, you know Biff, or many of his ancestors / descendants has a group of lackeys, usually 3 people who follow him around. They're the typical dumb
buttheads.
Yeah, using his own words there.
Using Biff's terminology.
And one of these guys, I forget which one it was, but I like to think it's the one who wears 3D glasses, was originally cast as Biff, but then they later recast Biff as, God, what is even his name?
Biff was played by Thomas F. Wilson.
Yeah, so they recast Biff. Thomas F. Wilson
is a
played him.
comedian now. Just want to point that out.
They recast Biff because the original actor for Biff was shorter than Michael Stoltz, and they didn't want that. Which, obviously, Michael J. Fox is pretty short, so when they recast Marty, it didn't really matter in the end.
Yeah, and...
but they kept Wilson on with the role anyway.
Yeah, and the guy who played Biff went to play the part that Thomas F. Wilson was going to play, one of the lackeys. So.
Yeah.
It's apparently the one named Skinhead. I don't know which one that was, but...
We can also talk about... I didn't realize that Crispin Glover and Leia Thompson also played George and Lorraine in 1985. I thought those... until recently, I always thought those were different actors.
No, yeah, they're the
But
same
it was
actors.
just prosthetic makeup.
That apparently took 3 hours to apply.
Right. Even
3 and a half.
into the second movie, Michael J. Fox plays 4 characters. 3, but 2 incarnations of Marty.
He plays Marty Jr., and Marlene, and then the old Marty,
Yeah.
so 4, yeah.
That makeup also took a long time to put on, according to statements from Fox.
Mm-hmm.
Right, but I never knew that Marty's parents were played by the same actors in both time periods in the first film.
Yeah. And it's interesting because Michael J. Fox, seems to play every McFly descendant or ancestor ever except George McFly.
Even Marlene, he plays his daughter. Plays Marty's daughter.
He plays Seamus McFly too in the Old West. His great-great-grandfather, I think.
Yes, his great-great-grandfather. Because his great-grandfather was the first McFly born in America.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if Wilson played 1985 Biff. I'm not sure on that one.
I think he did. I think he played Mad Dog.
He did?
Yeah, he played
Mad Dog was Wilson?
Yeah.
Huh.
Mad Dog was played by Wilson, and I'm pretty sure Griff was played by Wilson. I'm not...
well, Griff is just... Yeah.
I think Thomas F. Wilson played all of the Biffs, except I'm not sure about 2015 Biff. I'm pretty sure it was also Wilson for that, but I'm not entirely certain. But I would place money on the fact that it was.
Yeah, seems likely enough. And Mad Dog is the incarnation of Biff,
for the Old West.
For the Old West, the Tannen of the Old West, I guess.
Yeah,
because they're all Tannins.
Buford, Mad Dog, Tannen.
I hate that name. No, okay. Anyway.
There's a weird discontinuity because in the second film, when Marty shows up at the hotel and the video is playing and says it talks about Mad Dog as one of Biff's ancestors, they hadn't finalized the design for Mad Dog there, so the picture that actually shows during that video looks nothing like the Mad Dog in the third film because they hadn't finalized the design yet.
That's interesting. We can bring up now that the second and third films were produced at the same time.
Right.
And I think we can talk about that now because... Well, we should talk about
Crispin Glover because we haven't explained the controversy behind that. So Crispin Glover played George McFly in the first film, and then when they went to him for the second film,
because they obviously wanted to recast the same characters as much as possible. If you've seen the movie, one of the most obvious recasts was Marty's girlfriend.
Jennifer.
Right, Jennifer. She's not a very prominent character though, so there you have it.
So they went back to Crispin Glover and were like, hey, can you come back for the second film? And then they kind of had a dispute over how much he was going to get paid, and they never really came to any sort of agreement. So they didn't hire Crispin Glover and kind of took an extra, Jeffrey Weissman, and dressed him up in some prosthetics to make him look like Crispin Glover. And then they always kind of kept him in the background, so you'd never really know that it wasn't Crispin Glover.
Right, he's in the second film. George McFly is only seen in 1985. Right at the beginning, he's seen
1985.
He's seen in 2015. That's
hanging upside down, which was another method of trying to disguise the fact that it wasn't Crispin Glover.
And then they just rewrote. I think Zemeckis and Gale were obviously fairly irked at the fact that Glover wanted. Was demanding more pay than they thought was necessary, so they actually killed off George McFly in the 2000 or in the alternate 1985.
So that they wouldn't have to have him appear.
But right, like you were saying, they did have someone appear as his likeness, which he sued them over.
And won, unsurprisingly, because if he didn't win that, it would be more surprising than the fact that he did win.
Yeah. So there's some sort of clause, I think, something having to do with the Screen Actors Guild of America.
Yeah, it kind of formed the basis for kind of the laws and rules against using an actor to portray another actor's likeness. I mean, obviously there's circumstances in which you can do it, but you need to like get permission from the original actor and to use their likeness.
Apparently your intention can't be like, oh, I can't get such and such actor, so I'm going to get someone who looks like them and have them channel that actor in this character or something like that. So there you have it. Well, the first film obviously was a huge success. So, I think they did several location tests, and I read they almost deleted the Johnny B. Good scene where Marty is playing. Yeah.
That's an iconic scene.
Yeah, they almost deleted that scene because they felt it didn't add anything to the plot and just served to pad out the movie. But during the location tests, the audience was so responsive to that scene that they just decided to keep it in.
It is a good scene. It's fun, and it kind of brings out Marty's character.
It's one of the most iconic scenes from the movie.
Yeah, and with the whole Marvin Berry going off stage saying, "Hey Chuck, this is the sound you're looking for," because if you didn't know, Chuck Berry was the original performer of Johnny B. Good.
Yeah.
It's kind of a little time travel weirdness going on there.
There's a lot of that in these films.
And there's a lot of cool little references between the films and parallels between them that we can talk about once we've finished explaining behind the scenes of 2 and 3 that I think are pretty cool.
Lone Pine Mall. Anyway.
Lone Pine Mall. That's one of the most prominent ones. So Back to the Future 2 and 3. Well, yeah, like Kiyan said, the first one was obviously a big success, so they commissioned a second film.
Right, and basically what this was Universal coming to Zemeckis and Gale and saying, Back to the Future 2 is going to happen. Like, this is a franchise now. It's just such a big hit. There's no way there's not going to be a 2. Do you guys want to do it? Yeah. And they said they basically jumped on board. I think despite the fact that Back to the Future 1 was created as a finished product, it was left open for a sequel, but you can tell, just watching this trilogy and not reading anything about it, you can tell that it was meant to close all loose ends. It was left open at the end, but even in 2, they sort of go a different direction, because at the end of the first one, Doc comes back from the future and tells Marty that there's something wrong with his kids. And that's the first 30-ish minutes of the first one, but then, the second one, I'm sorry. But then they go a completely different direction. You can tell that they didn't expect a sequel as they were making this.
Yeah.
So when they had to go for the whole kids plot line, they decided to go a different direction, unsurprisingly, because I guess they didn't think they could do anything with that.
Well, a part of that may come up that later, long after they finished the production, Zemeckis and Gale kind of said they regretted having Jennifer get in the time machine with Doc and Marty because it kind of forced them into integrating Jennifer into the next plot.
And you can tell that they didn't want... They had her knocked out for most of it.
So they said later they kind of regretted, at the ending of the first film, having Jennifer get in the car. Like, specifically that part of the ending scene. Because if they made a second one, they would have had... Instead of going completely different direction with Doc and Marty, they would have had to integrate Jennifer somehow.
Yep.
So they kind of wrote themselves into a corner.
Yeah. I mean... They could have just retconned it. They sort of pseudo retconned it because it's a different actress, and Doc's lines, I believe, are slightly different.
They're the same, but he hesitates in the reshoot. If you don't know, they reshot the entire ending scene of the first film with the new Jennifer actor, shot for shot.
Right, because the first scene of the second film is the final scene of the first one.
And they actually did a really good job. It's pretty much indistinguishable from the first, except for the fact that there's like 2 small changes. One is that kind of Doc hesitates when he says one of his lines, whereas he didn't in the first filming. And the other one is obviously the fact that Jennifer is different.
Yeah. I guess they could have just retconned it.
Yeah, I don't really like films that retcon things though, because then it's like it kind of makes the first one lose kind of its
nullifies. Yeah.
So I'm glad they at least
they did.
went along with it, but, you know, they kind of did write themselves into a corner with Jennifer getting in the car with Marty and Doc.
Right. Get it? Because they wrote themselves into... Whatever. It was terrible. Even I'll admit that was terrible, and I love puns, in case you didn't already know. If you listen to Trust Your Doctor, you know that. But, God, what were we...
So, right, they commissioned a second film, and
it was basically just Universal saying, it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. Do you guys want to be a part of it or not? And they said yes, because...
it's their baby, basically. You know, this is their child. They're going to see it through to the end. So they started working on a second script, and Zemeckis had to go off and do Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
That movie.
That film that blends animation with live action that came out in the late 80s. But Gale so basically worked on the script by himself, and it was planned to just be one movie, but...
Right, Back to the Future 2.
In the process of writing it, they kind of went a little bit... Not overboard, but they kind of go longer than they had thought they were going to.
They wanted Marty and Doc to get to the Old West, and they just couldn't connect the ending of the first one to the Old West
unsurprisingly.
In less than like a two, and fit it all into a 2-hour movie. So they went to Universal and said, okay, look, instead of 2 movies, let's do 3. Mm-hmm. The budget for each was obviously kept sufficiently in check. Mm-hmm. It wasn't, let's do another movie for the same budget that this movie is. No, it was, I read the numbers somewhere. I think it was, instead of a $70 million movie, it
looks like they were each $40 million budget.
Yeah.
2 and 3.
So I think instead of a $70 million movie, they did 2 $40 million movies.
Which makes sense.
Right.
Which is still more than the first film. So.
Yeah. Which also makes sense since the first one was like...
19 million.
I mean, the first one, I'd say, was like the 80s movie. When you think of 80s movies, like Back to the Future, it's like the 80s movie.
Back to the Future and like Forrest Gump, kind of.
Forrest Gump was 1994.
Was it really?
Yes.
So Forrest Gump and Jurassic Park are the 90s. Back to the Future was the 80s. And Star Wars is the 70s.
Well, Star Wars is just its own thing, I
70s
think.
through 80s.
Star Wars is like a category of its own. And,
it's
and 1999.
Genre.
And 2015.
Yeah.
And 2016. And
That's
2017.
What I said, the 2000s.
Well,
It covers the entire millennium.
Does it now?
Yes.
All right. Well, so obviously started working on these 2 movies now, and the third one was The Old West, and I think The Old West was something they kind of maybe subliminally wanted to do in the first one, because in the original script they had Doc and Marty going out to the desert, which made it into the third one. If you've seen the third one, the first, when the Doc and Marty are trying to uncover the DeLorean, and when Marty's going back to 1885, that's shot out in some desert, Monument Valley, I believe, and... They might have subliminally just wanted to do this in the first one. I think Michael J. Fox, during the filming of Back to the Future 1, mentioned that he would love to see Doc and Marty go to the Old West since they had a time machine and everything.
Yeah.
But that obviously wasn't the point of the first film. So they finally did this here, but the second one, I believe Spielberg said this, was sort of... I think he compared it to Temple of Doom, where it's sort of like the dip in the trilogy, and... Looking at it now, 30 years later, it's just sort of a bridge from the first one to the second or the third one.
2 is the weakest of the 3. You can tell, obviously, that it's mostly just set up for the third film because, like we said, they planned it as one film.
I just want to interject that I like Temple of Doom. Yeah.
Temple of Doom isn't bad. It's good. It's pretty good.
I like it more.
It's also a prequel to Raiders of the Lost Ark, if you didn't know that.
Yeah, no, I know. But I liked it more than this is we're getting way off topic, but I liked it more than the third one. Anyway, that's that. Sorry for going on that tangent.
Yeah, because they planned it as one film, obviously, and you can tell that the second one is mostly just set up for the third, especially since it ends with "to be concluded" and then a trailer for the third film. So.
The second one is also very disjointed, I think, and that's part of the reason why I don't enjoy it. The first one obviously is set only in Hill Valley, and it's super prominent that you see all these differences between 1885, what am I saying? 1985 and 1955, because they're set in these same locations. You know, that town square with the clock tower, you see it's set up so much in the beginning of the film, and then when Marty's looking around, you see all these changes, and it's 50s-ized.
It's 50s-ized.
And that's great. And obviously they revised the script of the first one to have it only set in Hill Valley, because they were originally going to go out to Nevada into the desert to power the nuclear power generator for the time machine. But the second one is all over the place.
Well, it is still all in Hill Valley.
Yeah, but it's, you know what I mean. They
set,
go to the future and they go to an alternate timeline, and then
the thing was that apparently originally, instead of having them go back to 55, they were going to have Marty and Doc from the alternate 1985 go back to 1967.
Yeah, and explore the 60s instead of how the first one did the 50s.
Yeah, the 60s instead of the 50s. But then they were like, it'd be fun, let's revisit the first movie and have them have to avoid themselves, because we can do some fun things with that. And I think the parts of the second film that are set in the 50s are kind of the best parts of that film.
Right, it gets a lot more enjoyable, in my opinion, after they get back to 1955. Which is why I can forgive the future portions, which are sort of a little bit boring. The alternate universe, which was an interesting look at Marty's family in a different light, but just they didn't have the same charm as the 1955 setting. But I can forgive that because the second half of the second film is back in the 50s, and it's enjoyable seeing, like you said, another side of Back to the Future one.
Yeah, kind of the whole, they're gonna sock me. Oh, well, get out of there. No, the me that's on stage playing Johnny B. Good. And Doc's like, oh, well, stop them, man.
And you sort of, you go back, especially if you watch them all in a row like we did, you look at the first, you go back and you remember scenes you watched in the first one, and you say, oh, this would have happened if Marty wasn't interfering or something like that. Right. You realize, like, oh, Marty was there in an alternate version of himself.
Yeah, so, it's kind of cool that they went back and revisited, and then, it ends with the DeLorean getting struck by lightning, and,
I love that Doc writes a letter from 1885 to have it delivered to that exact location.
Moment. That's one of the best scenes in the movie, up there with, I think, the very first scene where the camera's panning across all the clocks and then through the automatic dog food machine, because I think it just sets up the whole movie perfectly.
It sets up Doc.
It sets up Doc's character.
And he has the plutonium just hidden under his bed.
Just under the bed. And then you see Marty come in on the skateboard, so you know that there's going to be a skateboard. But then, yeah, I agree, the whole note from the past scene is is like the second best scene in the movies. Because, the guy shows up.
I wouldn't put it that high up there, but I'd say
it's one of the better scenes in the films.
I'd say it's one of the better scenes in the second film. Because, really, if we're talking about best scenes in all three, the top 5 is going to be from the first one. Like, let's be honest.
Yeah, there's like 1 or 2 in the third that I would say could be up there. The train scene is fantastic.
Want some water? And then Seamus McFly just pours the water, and it's got all this dirt, I guess, and muck in it.
Yeah. The comedic timing of all the films is fantastic.
We should explain this cliffhanger, though. Doc is zapped by lightning while going over 88 miles an hour, and he accidentally goes back to 1885. And Marty's just left standing there in the rain, stranded in 1955 because he doesn't have a DeLorean anymore. And then this postman pulls up.
Yeah, from Western Union.
Right. You don't know he's a postman, but he walks up to Marty with a letter written from Doc, given to Western Union in 1885, and he told him to deliver it to this exact person, this exact location, 70 years in the future. Oh god, I loved that. It's just
you almost think it's Doc for a second because you can't see the guy in the car. It's kind of just a silhouette of a guy in a hat. You almost think for a second it could be Doc.
Yeah, you do.
And then it gets out and you're like, wait, what? But there's a lot of ire, I guess, in the fan community for the whole struck by lightning and it time travels, because a lot of people are like, but it wasn't going 88 miles an hour. But
why not? Is it specifically shown on screen that it was going less, or what?
Well, because they're like, well, it was just kind of staying still. But I mean, the actual explanation for why it goes back is because it rotates, it spins at 88 miles an hour, so it does hit 88 miles an hour.
Okay, I don't think that's
Just
I don't
to
think
get
that's-
that out there, because I know some people are like, but it wasn't going 88 miles an hour, so how did it time travel? There you go.
I don't think that's the question to ask in all these movies, but right at the end of the second one, also before the credits, has a teaser for the third movie. I
Yeah.
guess to reassure everyone that it wasn't just ending there. It was, if they put it after the credits, people would have been like, what? And then just walked out of the theater in anger.
Yeah, could you imagine it just ending with Marty running up to Doc and Doc going, I just succeeded, and Marty going, Doc, it's me, I'm back from the future. and then Doc fainting and it ends.
It does say to be concluded.
Right.
But since they were doing the second and third at the same time, the second came out, I want to say in the summer of 89, and the third one came out 6 months later.
The second one came out in November of 89,
November
and the
of
third
89?
one was March of 90. March, May, no, it was March. May. It was May.
May. So
7 months.
Yeah, November and May. All right. Yeah, so they had enough footage done from the third one that they could put a little teaser trailer at the end
Right. So yeah,
with the Western theme.
The Western version of the main theme, which is one of the most iconic movie themes of all time.
It's in the top 5.
It's up
easily
there with the likes of Indiana Jones and Star Wars.
Yeah, well, Star Wars is obviously number 1.
So
But,
you know,
yeah, the third one, it's sort of just what they wanted to do, with the sequel, but they had to obviously, like we said before, split it into 2.
and they decided for the third one. We've had 2 films about Marty McFly. Well, we've had one film
McFlys.
We've had one about Marty. We've had one that was kind of about both, but was mostly Marty. So they're like, well, let's do the third one, and let's kind of focus on Doc rather than Marty.
And Doc gets a romantic. It's not even a romantic subplot. It's part of the main plot.
Yeah, it's basically the main plot of the third film.
There's also the fact that Doc is going to die on Monday, because before Marty goes back to 1885, he sees Doc's grave and
When they're retrieving the DeLorean.
Right, which Doc is buried. I also think that's really cool. He buries the DeLorean or hides it or whatever and just waits for Marty to find it in the future. But Marty sees Doc's gravestone, knows when he's going to die, and when they get back to the 1885 period, he gets into a dispute with Mad Dog Tannen, and that's how he supposedly dies. But they remedy that.
There's the whole revelation that the grave says he was shot in the back and he died on a Monday. So Marty goes back assuming Doc's gonna get shot on the Monday, but then there's the fair, and Mad Dog pulls out the gun, and you're watching like, wait, but it's too early. Doc's not supposed to get shot yet. And then Mad Dog says, last time I shot someone with this gun, they took 2 days to die. And then you're like, oh boy, this is it. Doc's done for now. And then Marty picks up the pie pan and flings
Frisbee's pies.
and knocks the gun so it shoots Doc's hat off instead of shooting Doc.
And then the photograph that they have of the grave the name changes to Clint Eastwood, which is what Marty's going by in the past.
Right. So, and I think I also love the whole, Subaru replacements for the DeLorean won't be invented till 1947. So they're fixing it in 1955. They're building a new microcircuit, but it's not micro. So they've strapped this giant thing to the hood of the DeLorean. There's vacuum tubes and all this kind of hodgepodge equipment to get the DeLorean to travel, one more time back to the Old West.
Right, and
So, the third film is kind of a lot. I think the third film takes itself less seriously than the first 2 do, I would say. Not that it's like completely not taking itself seriously, but I think it does less than the first 2. Because it kind of just goes through the Old West like a fun little Western romp with these 2 guys from the future.
it has, I think, more serious undertones than the first one. The first one is like, there's like no moral in the first one. It's just literally, that's why I like
Don't
it.
kiss your mom.
That's why I
That's
like
the moral.
No, but seriously, that's why I like it. It's not some. It's not trying to be philosophical or anything like that. It's just a fun movie. The third one is, I think might have to do with the romantic subplot, but I think it also has to do with, Doc saying I think he actually says this in the second one, but time travel brings nothing but disaster, and the repercussions about messing with everything. But it was definitely less serious than the second one. I mean,
Yeah.
less dark than the second one. Maybe not less serious, but less dark, especially due to the alternate 1985.
Yeah, there's a lot of really dark subplots in the second one, the alternate 1985. Like, the whole... Lorraine is definitely in an abusive relationship with Biff.
Yeah, and probably an alcoholic.
Yeah, and Marty's brother... You don't know officially what happens, but there's a deleted scene where he's revealed to be an alcoholic.
And George McFly dying.
Getting murdered by Biff.
Yeah. But yeah, the third one has that whole romantic subplot. I think I see where you're coming from, because the romantic plot here is more serious than it was in the first one. Because the first one was obviously centered around like that romance, but it was just like silly and funny. This one is actually it's sort of, it's love at first sight, which how serious can that be? But
Yeah.
but it still takes itself more seriously, I guess, than the first one, especially with the scene with Doc and what's her face on the train. I'm sorry, I don't remember her name.
Clara.
Clara, right? On the train at the end.
I mean, the movie even takes a jab at the fact that there's going to be love at first sight, because Doc's like, I don't believe I could just fall in love with someone. I'm a scientist. I believe in logic, and then it happens.
Yeah, lo and behold, 3 minutes later,
moments like that, that's just funny. When it's they save Clara, and then Doc keeps calling it Clayton Ravine, and then Marty's like, wait a second, it's only called Clayton Ravine because a school teacher named Clayton falls in the ravine. And then Doc's like, whoa, I've changed time.
And then when Marty, because they have to get the DeLorean up to 88, so they're pushing it with a train, and supposedly the DeLorean goes off the cliff with the train, but when Marty gets back to 85, it's called Eastwood Ravine or something like that.
I think everybody presumes that Clint Eastwood falls into the ravine rather than Clara Clayton, so...
And going back to the romantic plot here in the third one, they wanted to, I guess, do the unexpected here. Doc Brown in a romantic relationship. But who would have guessed? I think it was also
was Christopher Lloyd's first on-screen kiss.
Yeah,
which
is surprising because he'd been an actor at this point for
a while.
Well, at least since like the 60s, I think.
Yeah. A couple years at least.
One or two. No.
Well, I mean, by the third film, he had been an actor for at least 5 years, because it was 5 years after the first film came out. So there was at least 5 years.
Well, the first film wasn't his first role.
Well, yeah, obviously.
Since like the 60s.
At least 5 years.
Yeah. Okay, I see what you're saying.
You don't know how long he was an actor before.
It's a very weird way to put it, but I see what you're saying. So yeah, obviously the second and third films were also a success.
Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale kind of said, you know what, we're done. We're not making a fourth one. The trilogy, as it stands, is complete.
There doesn't need to be a fourth one.
There doesn't.
Or a fifth. Or a sixth. Or
just
a seventh.
jump to the sixth. No, they looked at it and they said, this is a complete story. Because, it ends on a very upbeat note with... you think it's going to be sad because the DeLorean gets destroyed and Marty's like, I'm never going to see Doc again. Then all of a sudden pew, pew, pew. Then the train appears out of nowhere.
Doc has he married Clara, and they have a time-traveling train.
They named their kids Jules and Vern.
I feel sorry for those kids.
One thing I would change about this film, it's the names of those kids, because they're just terrible. Jules is okay. Vern...
And the second and third, since they were made at the same time, there's a lot, even more than I've noticed probably, but there's a lot of, what are they, not calls between the two, but there are a lot of little nods. Each film has a lot of nods to each other.
There's a lot of parallels between all three films,
right,
I think, that you wouldn't notice unless you watch them kind of really close together.
Right, and even just 6 months apart, I probably would have forgotten the whole Marty hurts his hand in a car accident thing that was brought up in the second and resolved right at the end of the trilogy. Mm-hmm. That's something that you appreciate when you watch them back to back like we did. I think even if say I'd watched these in theaters, I probably would have been like, what's going on at the end of the third one? Like the drag race scene would just seem so random to me had I not remembered the fact they brought up Marty hurts his hand, and that's why he gave up on music.
Right, and that's why you've gotten to that really sketchy deal with Needles, who happens to be the guy he's drag racing against. Then he gets fired in the future, and his life basically goes to pot because of that drag race. And then at the end of the 3, you see it happen, and Marty, after having all this development from going back and forward in time, instead of giving into Needles' whole, you chicken, he backs out.
Yeah, it's not a thing in the first one, but the 2 and 3 have this whole, I guess, sort of character development-ish thing with Marty, despite the fact that 3 doesn't really focus on him too much. Thing where he has to get over the fact that he just flips out when people call him chicken. and that's nice. I mean, they were produced at the same time, so they sort of have that over the 2 movies, because it's not resolved in the second one.
Right.
Not that it's something that needs to be resolved. It's sort of just part of his character. Right. But it's developed.
Yeah, and I think that leads into some of the parallels between the films. I mean, all of the films kind of feature... there's a scene where Marty's in a bed like, I had a terrible dream, and then someone says something like, oh, but you're safe here in 1955, or you're safe here on the 29th floor, or whatever, and he's like, what? So there's that parallel between all 3 films at the very least.
Yeah, there are more, probably more we didn't even notice.
Yeah, there's very specifically included parallels, which is supposed to tie together kind of all the eras of Hill Valley.
History repeats itself.
There's also the line right at the beginning, which basically describes the entire movie series where Marty's talking to Strickland, and Strickland's like, you're a slacker, McFly. No McFly's ever amounted to anything. And McFly says, well, history's gonna change. And it does, because he changes history, and George becomes a super successful author who eventually publishes a book named A Match Made in Space.
Right. There, just in the first one, there's also a lot of neat little things where it's in the original 1985 from the first movie, the very first time period in the trilogy, it's Twin Pines Mall, and then when Marty goes back to 55, he runs over one of the pines in the DeLorean, and when he gets back to 85, it's Lone Pine Mall.
Right. It's little things like that show you that the filmmakers actually cared about the movie they were making. And spent the time to think of these little nods. Mm-hmm. There are a lot more that like we don't even know. I assume there's probably tons of little in-jokes and references between all the time periods.
Right, and people who have these as their favorite movies have probably gone scene by scene.
This is my favorite movie, but I don't go scene by scene because that would be ridiculous and would be time-consuming.
Some people love these movies. They go... frame by frame, even, picking out these little things.
I would watch these movies over and over again, but I would never go frame by frame.
We have watched them over and over again.
I don't think I'd have the patience to do that. But it's cool to watch them back to back and notice these little subtle nods, like in the second and third to the first, or kind of foreshadowing in the second to the third. You see the time circuits always keep defaulting to 1885 for some reason. In the second, you're like, interesting.
Yeah, and I think it really works well as a trilogy because of this. Despite the fact that the first one was conceived to just be its own thing, they did what they needed to do to get the second one on track, I'd say, with the beginning. Yeah. And that ended up amounting to a less enjoyable, maybe hour 20 minutes of the second movie, but it's a concession I think they needed to make to do what they wanted to do with the latter half of the second movie and the third. And overall, I think it just works really well as a trilogy. You either, if you don't want to watch all of these, and I don't know why you wouldn't want to watch all of these.
No, yeah, these movies are great.
Yeah, you'd either... I think you can watch just the first one, that's fine. But if you watch the second one, you got to watch the third. It's like, as soon as you watch the second, it's just you...
You've locked yourself into finishing the trilogy.
Yeah.
The second one could even serve as a picking up point, I guess. You'd miss a lot. You'd miss a lot of the explanation of the first one and a lot of the plot, but if it came down to it and you only had the second and third to watch, you could probably pull it off. I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah, I would not watch just the second and third. Especially since I think the first one is just the best.
I think most people agree that the first one is the best.
Yeah.
I'm kind of torn between the first and the third just because I love the Old West. So the third one kind of gains brownie points for just being set in the Old West because of that.
The getting manure dumped on Biff. That's another one of the.
It's another one of those little
I just remembered.
throw forward back between the three. There's another one with the Marty goes on a skateboard rampage around the court square. And then
Skateboard rampage.
In the future, Biff is like, this all seems oddly familiar because he had seen not Marty Jr., the regular Marty, do it in 55 to Biff.
And then kind of in the beginning of the first with Power of Love playing, he's skating around the square, holding onto the cars and whatnot.
Yeah.
So there you go.
It works really well as a trilogy. And it spawned an entire franchise.
Right.
There was an animated series.
There's more to this than just these 3 movies. There are video games, I believe.
There's a Telltale video game, which I've played and I actually really enjoy. Because it goes to another period of history that I really enjoy. They decide to send Marty and Doc to the Prohibition era of Hill Valley.
Huh. Yeah, I haven't played this game. I've heard it's really well received.
It feels like it could be a natural progression of the story. Obviously, I wouldn't want it made into a movie, but it feels like it could be a story. They had to pull some kind of tech mumbo jumbo out of nowhere to get the DeLorean to exist again.
Yeah.
I think they explained it by when the DeLorean was struck by lightning, it caused a fault in the time circuits, which sent a duplicate of the DeLorean forward 100 years, not 107, forward 70 years instead of back. Mm-hmm. So Doc went to the future and retrieved that DeLorean and brought it back and uses that to travel. And then he gets trapped in jail in 1931, and the DeLorean has like a self-return mechanism. So Marty goes to see Doc, and then there's the whole scene of the DeLorean appearing, and Marty's all, what?
So you'd recommend this game then? If you're a fan of the movies.
If you can get past the tech mumbo-jumbo at the beginning, I think you would enjoy this. It features a lot of those throwbacks. I mean, the Tannen family of the Prohibition era he's a mob boss who runs a speakeasy. The McFly of the era is kind of a timid guy who works in the mob but turns on the Tannen boss to rat him out. And then it comes back to 1985 because turns out when you're in 1931 you kind of ruined the timeline, and there's another alternate 1985 where Doc is married like a woman Strickland who existed in 31 and she turns his mind to like social justice and social conditioning, so all of his technology is like social oriented, and Hill Valley turns into this quote unquote utopian compound. This nods to the movies. There's the scene where Marty's knocked out and he wakes up and they're like, you're safe in good old 1931 or whatever, so I recommend it.
The game also features Christopher Lloyd as reprising his role as Doc.
Christopher Lloyd reprises his role as Doc. Michael J. Fox doesn't reprise his role as Marty McFly because he was busy, but they got someone who was very good at doing a Michael J. Fox impression to do it, and
he got sued. No.
Michael J. Fox makes a cameo in the final episode of the series because it's episodic. So
yeah, it's from Telltale Games. So if you've ever played their games, they're usually episodic. Usually like franchise tie-ins, I guess, but not the typical. I don't know. Video games, franchise tie-in video games are like usually infamous for being terrible, but these are more. I think even like we play video games, obviously, if you haven't already guessed, but I think even non-video game fans can play this. Yeah. Like if you're not like a skilled player, it's not like something you need a lot of reflex to play. It's sort of just it's almost like a movie. You make like decisions.
You make decisions. Like when you go back, you have to choose a name to choose as your alias when you're back there, and it's all like famous scientists' names. Like one of them is like Carl Sagan. So
yeah,
then everyone calls you Mr. Sagan if you choose that one. It's good. I would recommend it.
Yep. Also, these were novelized too.
Unsurprisingly, I guess.
No, it's a movie trilogy. Like. It was originally conceived as a movie, so I don't know. I feel like it would lose the charm. I haven't read the novel, but I feel like it would lose its charm.
I've never really read any movie/TV novelizations. I've read like novels that are story expansion, or like I've read like monk novels that aren't novelizations of episodes. I don't really know what
Doctor Who, obviously.
Right. We've read a book of that, but I don't really know about the novelization of these movies, so I couldn't recommend it or not.
Yeah, me neither. I mean,
But, if you want to check it out, we're not going to stop you.
Super big Back to the Future fan, you might want to read these.
And obviously the animated series doesn't feature anyone reprise. Well, actually, I think Christopher Lloyd reprises his role again.
Yeah, Christopher Lloyd is really on top of it.
So, you can check that out. Apparently in that series, the DeLorean kind of becomes like the TARDIS because it can travel through time and space. So,
that's one of the things they were trying to avoid. I remember Zemeckis, Gale, and Spielberg said they wanted to avoid something that could travel through time and space. And that's why they went with a DeLorean, because it's a car. That's the way it travels through space. It's a car. It can only time travel.
So, I mean, you can check that thing out. Also, since this year is the 30th anniversary of this film, also partially why we started with it, they are working on and releasing, I believe, this year, a Back to the Future.
I knew we were going to do it at least once.
It had to happen. A Back to the Future music, especially since this is about time travel. A Back to the Future musical, which will be premiering on London's West End at some point during this year, supposedly. That's about all the information I know. Except that Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale are both involved in the production of the musical, and Alan Silvestri is working with the composer.
Interesting enough.
They're kind of getting the crew back together to make it good, I hope.
Yeah. There's also a book coming out, I think 2 days from the day this is being recorded.
Yeah, on the 23rd, I believe. Yeah, June 23rd, so it should be out by the time this episode actually goes out.
It's called We Don't Need Roads, The Making Back to the Future.
It's by Cassine Gaines, if you want to look it up.
Yeah.
Caseen.
Should cover a lot of the information we've covered here and more, obviously.
Right. Apparently he's done 500 hours of interviews with people who were involved with the film to put this book together. So if you're interested in, or if anything we've said has interested you, you can check that out.
Yeah, I mean, I might even check it out.
I might. It looks to be kind of cheap. Right now it's $10.41 to pre-order on Amazon. So
for a hardcover book, I assume it's a hardcover book. It's new. Yeah. So not bad.
So that kind of wraps up. We end on one fun fact that I've known since I've watched this movie the first time, that the DeLorean that they got for this film didn't have a speedometer that went up to 88 because at the time of filming, Jimmy Carter had a law in place that basically said speedometers on cars can only go up to 85. Because the belief was if the speedometer only went up to 85, you wouldn't speed.
Whether that was true or not.
We're not history majors, so we don't know if that worked or not, but they had to basically specially build a speedometer into the DeLorean that would go all the way up to 100 so that you could see the DeLorean get up to 88 when they were filming the speedometer. So there's kind of your fun fact of the day that you can tell even casual fans of the series.
Tell people who don't care, have them get
really mad at you, probably.
Walk up to strangers that you see today and tell them this. Please do.
But then tell them about this show that in Triple Play so that we can get more listeners. So, yeah, you can email us at thedoctor@decorativevegetable.com. It's kind of our all-encompassing questions, comments, concerns, angry rants, love letters line, where you can reach us there if you have information on Back to the Future. I guess suggestions for future trilogies. We probably won't take your suggestions right now because we have a list planned out for the next couple of episodes, but if you have suggestions for what you want to see way in the future, let us know, I guess. No guarantees. You can also find us on iTunes at Triple Play and on YouTube at Triple Play.
Check us out on Facebook, 3P Podcasts, and check us out on Twitter. Also, we're going with 3P Podcast, number 3, letter P Podcast. And next time, we will be filling in the gaps with frog DNA. But until then, the end.